I guess we can go into like what is like the long-term vision for the project? Like where, say, we get past full release, say we're like 5, 10 years from now, like where do you want the browser to be? Like in a perfect world where everything, where timelines are met, where things actually happen when you expect them to, where do you want to be?
So ultimately, what we want to do is we want to give people another alternative,
Mhm.
something that they can choose. And we would be very happy if we can put out a product
Mhm.
that some people choose and they love it
Mhm.
because it aligns perfectly with their own interests and their own idea of what a web browser should be.
Mhm.
Um, Now, what does that look like in practice? 5 to 10 years from now, well, we want to be on all the major platforms that people are actually using.
Mhm.
So Mac OS, Linux, and Windows are the obvious desktop platforms. We
Mhm.
want to try to be on the main mobile platforms as well, if they are still Android and iOS. We'll see. And we want to be something that anybody could download and start using, and it would be no fuss, just a browser. Um, doesn't try to do anything fancy, but supports the basic browsing needs of the average person
Mhm.
and allows you to use the popular extensions that people like to use.
Mhm.
That's sort of our goal. Like, when you go to a hardware store and you pick up a hammer and
Mhm.
you don't care what brand it is, if we can manage to build a browser that feels like that, like, oh, this works perfectly for me.
Mhm.
I forgot what it was called, but I remember the icon. I just tap on it and I'm online. Um, it's kind of modest as in terms of ambition, but
Mhm.
I would really like to build something like that just works for people. That just is just a competent browser,
Mhm.
um, and something that we also managed to prove is maintainable by a small team with a small budget.
Mhm.
In a way, I'm almost like afraid that somebody would decide to throw a large amount of money at us,
Mhm.
um, because it would put us in an awkward position of having these resources that we're we're trying to um, build something to handle without. Um, but that's a very bizarre, luxurious problem statement, I suppose. Like, I sure hope nobody gives us a
I have
lot of
too
money.
much money to deal. What do I do with all this money?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I
But
think
like,
that's
if you
a.
if you look,
Oh,
yeah.
go on.
I was just gonna say, like, you can see if you look at some of the major browsers today, how things can go terribly wrong if you get comfortable with that big pile of money.
Mhm.
When suddenly the people that were kept refilling it, they just stopped doing that
Mhm.
for one reason or another, or the money stops flowing. And so we don't want to get ourselves into a position where that could become a problem. So if we really like the setup that we have right now, where we have many sponsors, each contributing
Mhm.
like a portion of the sponsorship,
Mhm.
and we would like to expand that so we have like a strong patchwork network of sponsors, um, to give us that diversity of sponsors, I guess.
Mhm.
Um,
I think having that vision as a simple browser is kind of something that needs to be out there, right? Because with all of these browsers, which are basically just all Chromium skins or all Firefox skins, because everybody is building off of the same engines, the way they're differentiating themselves is adding more and more stuff into the browser, right? Like let's use, you can use like Vivaldi as an example, where they have an email client, an RSS feed reader, and a bunch, like every browser now has a PDF reader inside of it, and it's just adding more and more and more things into the browser. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, right? If that's what you want from it, you want this mega application where realistically you don't need, like, you could use your browser as an RSS feed reader. You could use it as a PDF reader. You don't need these tools installed on your system. But at the same time, a browser doesn't need to do all of that. You can have a browser that's its job is to be a browser, and I think there's definitely a place for that, and especially when it comes to actually creating something which can be maintained. I think sort of just has to be how you do it.
I imagine so, yeah. And like we're very, very like unlike all of these companies that are building on top of Chromium or WebKit or
Mm,
whatever, we are very, very sort of grounded in our and the technical reality of what we're doing, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
we're in the middle of building the engine, and we're very aware of what goes into that. And so our ambitions right now are just to build a competent engine, and then wrap that in a simple browser. And who knows, maybe when we get this thing working really well, we will have users saying like, it's really frustrating that whenever I download a PDF, it pops open in another window. Maybe we figure out a way to optionally integrate a PDF.js or some viewer like that,
sure.
whatever. But for the time being, like just a very simple browser is sort of where we're aiming for. That said, I think it's important to establish already now that we mean a simple browser with privacy respecting defaults,
Mhm,
um, and sensible privacy oriented defaults, let's say. And I don't like looking at ads online any more than you do. I don't like being tracked online any more than you do either.
mhm,
And we absolutely want to have all of the faculties necessary for like blocking ads, blocking tracking, all of that stuff.
mhm.
We're not trying to build a browser that like gives the trackers what they want.
Sure.
It's ultimately we're building this product for users.
Mhm,
Um, so yeah, I guess that's the one thing I would add to it. It's a simple generic browser for users,
mhm,
not for anybody else.
mhm,
And we are in a good position to build that because we don't have any loyalties to, um, you know, advertisers or trackers or whoever would want to find out more about what you're doing online.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, in some ways, I guess we are in the best position of all the browsers to build something like that.
So earlier you talked about how at one point what was driving development is some would say, hey, this site doesn't work, and you would sort of try to get that site working. And you said you switched to more of a test driven development. So how is the project actually driven now? Like how do you decide that this is the thing we need to work on?
So it's a hybrid approach, let's
Mhm,
say. We have 7 people working on it full time, and then
mhm,
we also have a community of volunteers working on it as well.
mhm,
And everybody has sort of specialized in an approach to development, let's say.
mhm,
So we have some of the test driven people, some of the performance driven people, and also some sort of compatibility driven people. Um, and as a leader and manager, what I try to do is I try to find what type of person somebody is. How do they thrive as a developer, and then just get them to work in that way. So
mhm,
if somebody thrives pushing um, test scores go up, then like try to find a way for them to work where that can be central to their work.
mhm,
If
mhm,
somebody gets really excited about seeing websites work, try to find a way for them to work where they can get to see websites work.
mhm,
And we have all different types of person on the team,
mhm,
and what that gives us is like a nice coverage, I suppose, where we're making progress on all these fronts at the same time. Um, but the test driven part is a little bit newish. So in August of last year, so I guess like half a year ago, 6 months ago, if my math is mathing, um, it's difficult to do arithmetic sometimes.
I get it. I get it.
At least when you're on a podcast. But yes, half a year ago, we
Mhm,
started running this thing called the web platform tests,
mhm,
which is a comprehensive test suite for browsers. It's co-maintained by all the browser vendors.
mhm,
So the idea is that whenever somebody implements a feature or fixes a bug in a browser,
mhm,
you would create a bunch of tests to go along with that, and then contribute those to the web platform tests repository. And in this repository today, there are, I think, like 2 million subtests, which is just
uh-huh.
large amount of tests, let's
Right.
say.
Yeah.
And
Like that's putting.
yeah,
I think that's like. Yeah, no, that's a lot more than like Vulkan has, and Vulkan already has a stupid amount of tests.
right. Yeah. So the web platform is fairly complicated.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's fair to say.
I think
And
so too.
a lot of tests have been written for it. And the test suite is by no means, like a complete coverage of the platform. It's
Mhm.
evolving daily. People keep adding more tests to it. And this is a great thing because it means that every browser can run these tests and find out, do we behave the same as the other browsers? Are
Mhm.
we implementing the spec correctly? And once we became able to run this test suite, it just became a part of our workflow is to um, see how we're doing and
Mhm.
try to make improvements on our test score. Because the more of these tests we pass, the more coverage of the web platform we have in our browser, and the more compatible we are with other browsers.
How long does it take to run through this test suite?
At the moment, it takes us just under 5 hours. Um, but we are also working on improving the cycle times.
Mhm.
So what the other browsers tend to do is they throw multiple machines at this. So they just like
Right.
divide a run across many machines. We do it on a single machine. And so the other browsers, they kind of finish a run in an hour or so.
Mhm.
And then we're taking 5 times as much time.
Right, right. I
Yeah.
guess there would be sets of tests that are logical to group together, so you could put those all on one machine.
Yeah, I think in theory you can kind of slice and dice however you like and
Okay,
just
fair enough.
divide it across many machines.
Mhm.
But that's not something we've done yet because it's been good enough for us to get a new score every 5 hours. It's been okay.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, it takes us about 5 hours to run, and our current score is something like 1.77 million points out of 2 million.
Okay.
So we've been making good progress, and if you look closely at this, you'll find that it's like very heavily weighted in some categories. There
Mhm.
is famously 1.1 million tests for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean text encoding.
Ah,
Um, so
ah.
I like to make graphs that subtract those tests because it's a bit more interesting without them.
Right,
Since
yeah.
everybody supports those things, and then you get 1.1 million points for free.